All right, so we're working on Pong, and we want to figure out how to get the paddles on the screen, how to get them moving up and down. So in our notes, we've given you some starter code. So if you go ahead and open that link to starter code, you will find code that looks like this. And if I run the code, let's run it, I get this little screen. And if I click on it to activate it, then I hit my little keys, nothing happens. So I just have kind of a layout set up for us. So we need to add some more code to get this to behave. But let's take a look first of all at the code that we do have and what's happening here. We have, first of all, we set up like a little mini canvas. So this is just for our practice, but then when you do your real code, you're going to want to have your actual dimensions of your canvas. We have a paddle. The paddle width is going to be 20 pixels. The height is 80. And then the center, this is a little XY list. The first coordinate is the X position, and the second coordinate is the Y position. So we're going to keep track of the center of the paddle. And so the X position is going to be 10, which is half of the paddle width. And then the canvas, height divided by 2, that's what we're going to start it in the center of the canvas. So it's good. The paddle center starts off the beginning of the code in the middle of your canvas. Now here's our draw handler, and we have right here our draw line. This is the key to drawing that little paddle. And what you have is this part is the first point of your line, the one endpoint, and then this represents the second endpoint, and then this is the width of the paddle, and then this is the color. So this pad cent 0, pad cent 1 minus 40, what is that? What does that mean? Well, let's take a little picture and help you understand that. So I'm going to scroll down here. So if we're looking at our paddle overall, our paddle is 80 pixels high. It is 20 pixels wide. The paddle center is going to be at 10 pixels. And then the top of the paddle is going to be whatever the center is minus 40. Remember, we count as we're going up, we're going to subtract because the origin is at the upper corner of the canvas is 0, 0. So by subtracting 40, that's going to be the topmost part of the paddle. And then if we add 40 to the center, that's going to give us the bottom point of the paddle. So by drawing a line, we're going to have a line that's essentially 80 pixels long, starting at the center, and 20 pixels wide. So that's the key to that whole section of code that we have right here. That is what's drawing that little paddle. So we've got the paddle, but now we want to move the paddle. And we want to move the paddle by pushing the S and the W keys, and that will get the paddle going up and down. So we've given you a little bit of code that you can drop into your starter code. So we got some key up and some key down handlers, but we're going to have to play with these because these aren't going to work perfectly. So let's go ahead and copy it, and I'm going to drop it in here. And this frame.set, that has to go below the code where we have defined our frame, because you have to have that frame equals simple GUI, and then you have your handlers that are defined. So here we are down here, and we have our key up and key down. All right, so let's just for fun run this and see what happens. You'll notice I put a new variable in here called padvol, which stands for pad velocity. So let's go ahead and add that with we're going to initialize it. I'm going to initialize it to 5 to start off. So we have a paddle velocity. In other words, we need to get the paddle moving so it goes up and down. So if we look at our key down function, if we type the key S, then we should be able to take, this is our pad cent, so this is the Y position of our paddle, the paddle center. We're only going to be manipulating the Y position. The X position isn't going to move because the paddle doesn't go right and left. It just goes up and down. So we're only going to be playing around with pad cent 1, which is the Y coordinate. By plus equaling the paddle velocity, that will get it to move up or down. So let's go ahead and run it. Activate the canvas, and now I'm hitting the W button and it goes up, and I hit the S button and it comes down, which is kind of cool, except that you don't want to play Pong by hitting the button a million times because that's no fun. What we want it to do is we want to hit the W button and have this just glide up, and when we let go of the button, it releases and then glide back down again. So this is good, but it's not perfect. Now, how are we going to have the paddle actually continually moving? And the key is when you want something to be continually moving, like every 60th of a second, it moves a little bit. In order to have something moving all the time, we have to put it into the draw handler. So I'm going to grab this code and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to drop it in the draw handler. And so now what's going to happen is within the draw handler, whatever my paddle velocity is, it's going to be continually updating every 60th of a second, this little function. So my pad center is going to be continually moving. So I don't necessarily want that here. I'm going to comment it out for now. Now let's see what happens when I run this code. Oops, I got an elif key. It's not going to help me to, I guess I can't comment that out. So I will comment the whole thing out. All right, so now let's run. Ooh, yikes, where'd it go? It just took off. Let's run it again. Ooh, yikes, it disappeared again. Okay, so it is actively moving, but the problem is, first of all, my paddle velocity is going super fast. Remember I set it to 5? I'm going to set it to 0, and then this thing is not going to go anywhere. So yeah, now it's not going to, well, it doesn't do anything with the WS key either, but it doesn't actually move. So what we want to do is in our key down function, we want to control the paddle velocity, not the actual position of the paddle. So I'm going to get rid of this part where it talks about the going 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. Paddle velocity. I'm going to set the paddle velocity equal to a value. So paddle velocity, I'm going to make it positive for the S key. That's going to make it go down, and so that means I'm going to be adding value to the position. So let's see. I'm going to say paddle velocity equals 1. I'm just going to keep it small for now. And then if I press the W key, I want that paddle velocity to become -1. -1. Okay, so what's happening here? If I push the S key, the velocity is going to get set equal to 1. And if I push the W key, the velocity is set equal to -1. Now I have made paddle velocity a global variable here. So when I change its value, it's going to get remembered. And up here, it's going to get remembered in the draw handler. So now I can control in the draw handler what's happening with that paddle. The paddle center is going to be moving up or down depending on whether I push the S or W key. So let's run it and see what happens. Okay, so select this, so activate it, and now I'm hitting the W button. Woo, there it goes. And it keeps on going. And hit the S button, I can turn it around and send it back down. Woo, so that's pretty fun. It just keeps going. Now it's not going very fast. Like this is like you're not going to be able to be successful playing Pong with it going that slow. So if you want to adjust the paddle velocity, you could. So let's say I'm going to go instead, I'm going to go 3 and -3. Now let's run it. Okay, activate. Okay, that's better. So now I really need to be able to move my paddle in order to hit that ball. Okay, so that's pretty good. All right, now the problem is it never stops. So now I need it to actually stop moving when I let up on the key. And so we're going to use the key up draw handler. So what we're going to say is if the key is equal to simple GUI S, in other words, if I let up on the S key or I let up on the W key, then what I want to do is change that paddle velocity. The paddle velocity, I want to change it to 0. So I want it to stop moving basically. I don't want the velocity going anywhere if I let up on the key. I only want the velocity to be going if I push down on the key. Notice I have the global variable in here, paddle velocity, so that I can change it within this key up function. So let's run it now. Okay, so I activate and I go W. Ah, nice. S. Good. So I can now move it back and forth. Okay, now the next part, which I'm not going to demonstrate in this little video, is you have to make it so that the paddle doesn't go off the screen. Yikes, it doesn't do you any good up there. So in other words, when it gets up here to the top, it has to stop and it won't move anymore. Or when it goes to the bottom, boom, it stops there. It won't go off the edge because that's no good. So that will be coding for the next part of the lab.